And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
The Ares Project. Now, a real quick thing about this game is that the designer of this game, or the designers, I'm sorry, Jeff and Brian Engelstein, are contributors to my show, The Dice Tower, and I also consider them good friends. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I was able to play test this game, I think, a couple of years before it was released, finally. But what the Ares Project is it is essentially taking a real-time strategy game, think Warcraft or Starcraft style games, and make it into a board game. Now that's a very difficult process to do because a real-time strategy game is all about, well, what the name says, the fact that it's in real time. But essentially you have these buildings and you build units and you go fight other people's units and destroy their units and destroy their buildings. Well, that's essentially what happens here. It's not going to be as fast, but they've done a good job at doing it. Let's take a look at it, and then I'll talk more about my feelings at the end. In this game, players are going to pick one of four factions. Each faction is going to come with a base card like this, also with a shield which has all the rules and all the things that you need to know for your specific faction. You see it's a very giant shield. That's because in this game it's incredibly important that you hide what you're working behind. They're also going to get a deck of cards for their faction and then a pile of tokens for their factions. These tokens are one of several types here. You have ground forces, which are in the green square boxes. Then you have armor, or infantry, I guess. Armor is the red circles. Then buildings are your pentagon, and they're gray. And then you have air units, which are triangles, and they're blue. And then there's also other tokens you can see here. These are power tokens. And so you have a bunch of these tokens, and building these buildings to build these tokens to fight your enemies. And each army has basically its own board here. Now, before I go any farther, let me say this. I'm not going to try to explain the game completely from this video. There is no way you're going to understand what I'm saying from just this video. The game comes with a rule book that explains the basic rules and then has the advanced rules. And then when you play with the advanced rules, there's a special rule book for each of the four factions. The four factions are the Terran, or they're the normal humans. Then we got the Xenos, they're like bugs found on Mars. And then we have the Kahum, or whatever, they're humans who have psychic powers, or I guess they're on Mars too. And then we have the Colossus, which is a giant robot. And so each of these has their own board. The Colossus has a giant board where you're going to put the different parts of the Colossus on there. But there's a basic game and an advanced game. And in the basic game, and I'm going to show you some of the basic game, and then I'll talk a little bit about the advanced game. The game is going to revolve around these cards. And see, what you're going to have here is, at the beginning of the game, you're allowed to go through your deck and pick a couple of the buildings that you have. And when you're going to have these buildings that you're going to have played behind your screen like this. And what's really cool, and one of the things that I like about this game, are that most of the buildings have two sides. So I can build this building, which lets me build artillery units, or this building, which lets me build heavy tank. Each building will build one kind of unit, and so on my turn, basically I'm drawing a card, and then I play a card face down in front of me. I can play it as a building, or I can play it any card as a resource on that building. And when a battle happens, and there's different cards in the deck, like this one here, which lets you make an attack on somebody else, I will reveal my forces, and I will transform the resources that I put onto a card into units. For example here, this heavy tank, it takes 3 resources to build one, so I put 5 there. So unfortunately 2 of them don't get used, but the other 3 will transform into a heavy tank on this. And when battle comes, I'm going to take all the buildings that I might have, and I'm going to put all the units that I might have built, let's say these are the units that I built on them, and then they're going to go up against the units from my opponent. So my opponent's going to have different units, and he's going to bring his, and we're going to, through different ways, we're going to be putting those units up against each other, and then we're going to be rolling dice. The game comes with dice, but we're going to be using the special Dice Tower dice to show how this works here. Let's take a closer look at this card. Now, you get to roll dice equal to the number of units on the card, so the more units the better. But when the rockets guys here, when they attack infantry, they get a hit in a 0 or less. And you say, well, then why even put that on there? Well, because there's modifiers and such, and they might get a bonus. And they can hit armor at a 3 or less. They hit air at a 3 or less. They hit buildings at a 2 or less. I could flip it over and have these stealth units, which hit infantry in a 2, 1, 1, 1, and then they have a special stealth ability too. And that's what's really neat about this game, is that you have different units that will hit. I mean, these heavy tanks rip up enemy armor, while artillery is going to smash opponents' buildings and their infantry. And so it really is a neat aspect to the game as you look at these cards, trying to figure out which one you want to use with different special abilities. And then you simply roll dice. You usually have to attack the one across from you, but you can attack ones that are diagonal to you or even farther diagonal to you for negative modifiers. And so after a while, somebody's going to retreat because they're getting decimated, and they'll pull back, and you'll hide everything behind the shields again, even though people kind of have an idea. You build armies, and you keep going for the attack. Now, you're going to have this neutral territory that's in the middle of the table, and when you can attack this territory, once you capture it, you can attack your opponent's base directly from there. Destroy your opponent's base, and you win. Otherwise, you get points for holding this, and you get points for every successful attack that you do during the course of the game, and whoever has the most points wins. The advanced game does basically the same thing as what I just said, although the advanced game really brings in a lot of special abilities. Buildings have costs, and we use these power tokens then to power different buildings. And buildings just have such an interesting method. Like, for example, the bugs, you're going to put larvae here, which will turn into eggs, and then you'll be able to send those out and change those. The acolytes here from the Kahum, they're going to be able to, they need a lot of power, but they're able to upgrade into better and more powerful units, and they have special abilities that they can use, and other things that can go on during the course of the games. Psionic abilities. The humans, they have some building and workers that they can use to send to different places to get extra bonus resources, and they have a nuke. The robot is my personal favorite, but at the same time, I don't think that it's better than any other. It's just, come on, it's a giant robot. But they can place cards in any section, in a sense, and that determines what kind of card that is. And also they can add pilots and special abilities. Now, I think the game has been play tested extensively, like I said, because they're all different. But what's really interesting is they all have a completely different play style. It isn't like the Terrans are one faction with better airplanes than the other. And it isn't like these guys have better armor. No, they all have a different feel, and when you play the game, it's amazing the different feel that you can get. So, in essence, though, the concept is very simple. You're just playing cards from your hand, usually as a building, or an attack, or resources. In the advanced game, sometimes buildings will cost resources, so you got to put some resources down, and then put the building on top of it, using those resources to build a building. But taking a card in your hand and deciding whether to use it as a resource or as a building is a tough choice. And then what buildings are you going to put out? And you really want to have a balanced force, because you never know what your opponent is going to attack you with. And so that's, in essence, a very, very, very basic overview of what the Ares project is like. So there you have it, the Ares project. And what's interesting about this game is there's those 4 factions, which are essentially, essentially, it's the 3 factions from StarCraft, the Terran and the Zerg and the Protoss. But they're not. That's just what it seems like. And then the giant robot. The 4 factions are neat. You can play this as a 2-player game, 1-on-1, or you can expand it to 3 or 4. I kind of like the 2-player version myself, just going after each other. But you could play with up to 4 players. The game itself is not a simple one to understand, I guess. There's a lot of games that have basic rules and advanced rules, and I say, who's playing with these basic rules? If you play this, get out the basic game and play it. You're going to have to play the basic game to understand what's going on here. I think because the basic game explains how it plays, and you go, oh, and then you can learn a couple of the factions and how they work. I do not wish to scare you away, but the complexity here, well, there's not complexity, but just understanding how everything fits together is a little high. And then once you understand it, it's very easy. The icons are easy, and to me, I just love the fact of rolling dice. And this game lets you roll lots of dice. You can have great strategy, but your dice rolls go against you. Too bad. But I do like the combined arms thing, the pushing to have air, and has that sense of rush. You're putting down cards as fast as you can, resources building up. Okay, once you can attack, you could attack any minute. Should I build a few more units here? Should I attack now? And what are you going to do? And it's neat. I I think it's a cool game. I think it's really neat how the 4 different factions are balanced. It's almost tempting to get another copy of it so I can play Giant Robot versus Giant Robot, or, you know, Tyrann versus Tyrann. But it's still neat on how they're balanced. So if this looks like something that interests you, and I don't think this is for every gamer. I really don't. I think this is for somebody who wants to, you know, have a straight-up attack game where they're attacking their opponent. And if you played a lot of these games and you felt like, oh, this combat system's dumb, this combat system's good. It's simply roll dice and kill units. But the way it's done and the way the cards interact with each other, it's very fast, very simple, and I think it plays well. The game has a kind of a retro art look, and that looks throughout the game. There's a guy in the rulebook called Tom the Tyrann, who loses badly, but we'll forgive them for that because this is a good game. Congratulations to the Anglescenes. I'm very pleased with this game, and I think there's going to be a lot of people who like it. It may look like it's a small game. It comes in a very thin box, but don't let that deter you. Go check it out. Give it a play, and play it several times. I think you'll really end up enjoying it.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.
Yeah.